In the year 2247, humanity found itself in a strange and uneasy partnership with the Zarnith Empire. This vast collection of alien species, ruled by strict laws and a powerful military, had once been Earth's greatest threat. Now, after years of conflict and negotiation, they were allies, or at least that was what everyone believed. The truth was far more complicated. John Carter stood in the grand hall of the Vanguard, the Empire's flagship. He was tall, with short brown hair and a calm expression that rarely changed, even under pressure. Beside him was Laura Bennett, a woman with sharp green eyes and a quick mind. She carried a small device in her hand, one that could translate any language instantly. Together, they represented Earth in this fragile alliance. The room buzzed with activity. Alien diplomats moved about, their forms ranging from insect-like creatures to towering beings with shimmering skin. The air smelled faintly metallic, a reminder of the advanced technology surrounding them. John adjusted his jacket, feeling out of place despite his years of experience. Humans were still newcomers here, seen as weak and inexperienced compared to the ancient civilizations of the Empire. A Zarnith officer approached them, his armored body gleaming under the artificial lights. His voice was deep and resonant as he spoke. "Ambassador Carter, we have received reports of unrest near your colonies." "Explain." John nodded, keeping his tone steady. "Unrest is not uncommon on developing worlds," he replied. "But I assure you, it is being handled responsibly." His words were polite, but his mind raced. Unrest was exactly what Earth wanted. Small rebellions that weakened the Empire's grip without drawing too much attention. It was a delicate game, one that required patience and precision. Laura stepped forward, her translator device glowing softly. "Perhaps we should focus on trade agreements instead of accusations," she suggested. Her voice was warm, almost soothing. After all, prosperity often calms tensions. The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. But know this, the High Marshal grows impatient with excuses." As the officer walked away, Laura leaned closer to John. "They're watching us more closely now," she whispered. "We need to be careful." John sighed. "Careful isn't going to win this war, Laura. We've spent years planting seeds of doubt in their system. If we stop now, everything falls apart." Laura glanced around the room, ensuring no one was listening. "I know. But if they catch us..." She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew the consequences would be dire. Later that evening, back in their quarters, John reviewed files sent from Earth Command. Reports detailed how successful their efforts had been so far. Rebellions were spreading across the outer regions of the Empire, fueled by carefully manipulated treaties and propaganda. The Zarnith saw humans as harmless diplomats, incapable of causing real harm. They couldn't have been more wrong. John stared out the window at the endless expanse of space. Somewhere out there, countless lives hung in the balance. Humanity had endured centuries of suffering under stronger races. Now they were fighting back, not with weapons, but with words and ideas. It was a dangerous game, but one they had to play. As he turned away from the view, Laura entered the room, holding a cup of tea. "How long do you think we can keep this up?" she asked. "As long as it takes," John replied. "Whatever it takes." Neither of them noticed the faint red light blinking on a nearby console, a sign that someone somewhere was already starting to piece together the truth. The next day brought another round of negotiations, this time in a smaller chamber deep within the Vanguard. The walls were lined with glowing panels that cast an eerie blue light over everyone present. John Carter sat at the center of the table, his posture relaxed, but his mind sharp. Laura Bennett was by his side as always, her translator device ready in case any alien language proved too complex for the automated systems. Across from them sat Commander Vextar, a Zarnith officer known for his cold efficiency and unyielding loyalty to the Empire. His dark armor seemed to absorb the light around him, making him appear even more intimidating. Next to him was a younger officer, Kelleran, whose nervous glances suggested he was new to these high-stakes meetings. Vextar began without preamble. "There have been reports of human interference in our border regions," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Colonies once loyal to the Empire are now questioning our authority. Explain yourselves." John didn't flinch. He had prepared for this moment. Leaning slightly forward, he replied, "Commander, humanity has no interest in undermining your empire. Our focus is on peaceful coexistence and mutual growth." His tone was calm, almost friendly, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of tension. Laura chimed in, holding up her translator device. "In fact, we've noticed unusual activity among certain factions beyond your borders. It might be worth investigating whether external forces are sowing discord." Vextar narrowed his gaze, studying both of them carefully. "External forces, or internal ones?" he asked, his words heavy with suspicion. Before John could respond, Laura activated her device, projecting holographic data onto the table. The images showed encrypted communications intercepted near rebellious colonies, messages written not in human languages, but in those of other alien species. "These transmissions suggest someone else is manipulating events," she explained. "Perhaps rivals seeking to destabilize your rule." Kelrin glanced at Vextar, clearly unsure how to react. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then Vextar leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. "Your evidence is intriguing," he admitted reluctantly, "but I will not tolerate deception. If I discover you are lying, there will be consequences." As the meeting ended, John and Laura returned to their quarters, walking quickly through the ship's metallic corridors. Once inside, Laura closed the door behind them and exhaled deeply. "That was too close," she muttered. "They're starting to connect the dots." John nodded, pacing the small space. "We expected this. The Empire isn't stupid. But if they find hard proof..." He shook his head, unwilling to finish the thought. Later that evening, while reviewing additional files sent from Earth Command, Laura noticed something odd. She replayed footage from the meeting earlier, focusing on Kelrin. Something about his behavior seemed off. He kept glancing at her translator device with unusual interest. Zooming in on the recording, she realized his gaze wasn't casual, it was calculating. "John," she called out urgently. When he turned to look at her, she pointed at the screen. "Do you see this?" He was scanning my device, not just looking at it, actively trying to analyze it. John frowned, stepping closer. "If he was checking for hidden data streams, it means they suspect we're smuggling information." Laura bit her lip, thinking fast. "We need to tighten our security. And maybe it's time to accelerate some of our plans." John agreed. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Every delay gave the Zarnith more time to uncover the truth, and once that happened, there would be no turning back. As they worked late into the night, preparing countermeasures and strategizing their next moves, neither of them noticed the faint hum of surveillance equipment embedded in the walls. Somewhere far away, Commander Vextar watched their every move, piecing together fragments of evidence that hinted at a much larger conspiracy. The game of cat and mouse was escalating, and sooner or later, someone would make a fatal mistake. The following morning, John Carter and Laura Bennett were joined by Daniel Hayes, a young analyst assigned to assist them. Daniel was quiet and reserved, with glasses that made him look younger than he actually was. He carried a tablet filled with data logs and reports, his fingers moving quickly across the screen as he briefed them on recent developments. "Sir, Mom," Daniel began, glancing between John and Laura. "There's been an increase in encrypted messages coming from Earth Command. They're flagged as urgent, but I haven't been able to fully decode them yet." John raised an eyebrow. "Urgent? Any idea what they're about?" Daniel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's unclear, but there are references to internal investigations within the Empire. Someone is looking into human activities here, specifically our role in the unrest along the borders." Laura frowned, leaning closer. Do we know who's leading this investigation? Daniel nodded slowly. Commander Vextar. He's been gathering intelligence for weeks now. If he finds anything concrete, his voice trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. John crossed his arms, thinking, this changes things. We need to stay one step ahead of him. Keep working on those messages, Daniel. Let us know if you find anything else. As Daniel left the room, Laura turned to John. We can't afford any mistakes right now. If Vextar gets even a whiff of what we've been doing. I know, John interrupted, his tone firm. But panicking won't help. We stick to the plan and adapt as needed. Later that day, Laura decided to take matters into her own hands. Using her access codes, she slipped into a restricted area of the Vanguard database. The corridors were dimly lit, and the hum of machinery echoed around her as she moved cautiously. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay focused. She couldn't afford to be caught. Once inside the secure terminal, Laura began searching for clues about Vextar's investigation. What she found chilled her to the bone. Hidden among routine reports were detailed analyses of human diplomats' actions over the past year. Someone had been tracking their every move, connecting seemingly unrelated events to form a damning picture. Worse still, there were mentions of surveillance devices planted in their quarters. Laura's stomach tightened. They had been compromised without realizing it. She copied the files onto a portable drive, careful not to leave traces of her intrusion. Just as she was about to log out, a notification flashed on the screen. Unauthorized access detected. Her breath caught in her throat. Without hesitation, she ejected the drive and hurried back the way she came, her mind racing. Back in their quarters, Laura showed John what she had discovered. His expression darkened as he read through the documents. They're closing in, he muttered. We need to act faster. Before they could discuss further, Daniel returned, looking pale and anxious. I think I found something, he said quietly, holding up his tablet. On the screen was a series of encrypted messages, not from Earth Command, but from someone aboard the Vanguard. They contained fragments of conversations about covert operations and classified missions. This doesn't make sense, Daniel whispered. Why would someone here be talking about Earth's leadership like this? Laura exchanged a glance with John. Because whoever sent these messages knows more than we do, she said grimly. And if they're willing to risk exposure, it means they're desperate or dangerous. John stood up, pacing the room. We can't trust anyone right now, not even each other. From this point forward, we operate under the assumption that we're being watched, and that someone close to us might already be working against us. The weight of the situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. The Empire was unraveling, piece by piece, thanks to their efforts. But as cracks formed in the foundation of their mission, they realized the greatest threat might not come from the Zarnith at all. It might come from within their own ranks. That night, Daniel Hayes couldn't sleep. The encrypted messages he had uncovered weighed heavily on his mind. He sat alone in his small cabin, the glow of his tablet casting shadows across the walls. His fingers trembled as he tried again and again to decode the files, but they were locked behind layers of advanced security. Frustrated, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He knew he shouldn't have been digging so deep. John and Laura had warned him not to investigate further, but curiosity gnawed at him. What was Earth Command hiding? And why did it feel like everyone aboard the Vanguard was walking on thin ice? Finally, after hours of effort, something clicked. A fragment of text appeared on the screen. A name. Operation Eclipse. It didn't mean much on its own, but the context made Daniel's blood run cold. The message hinted at a secret directive from Earth's leadership, one that involved manipulating key figures within the Zarnith Empire. Worse still, there were references to necessary sacrifices. Daniel's heart raced. Necessary sacrifices. What did that mean? Who or what was being sacrificed? He felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he realized the truth might be darker than he'd imagined. Before he could process it further, His workstation flickered. A warning popped up. Remote access detected. Someone was hacking into his system. Panic surged through him as he tried to disconnect, but it was too late. The screen went black for a moment, then lit up with a single message. Cease all unauthorized activity. His hand shook as he powered down the tablet and shoved it into a drawer. Whoever was watching him now knew what he had done, or at least suspected. For the first time since joining the mission, Daniel felt truly afraid. The next morning, John and Laura noticed Daniel's absence during their usual briefing. At first, they assumed he was running late or avoiding them after yesterday's discovery. But when he didn't show up for lunch either, concern began to grow. Laura decided to check his quarters. She knocked softly on the door, calling his name. There was no answer. After a moment's hesitation, she used her access code to unlock it. The room was empty, the bed untouched. On the desk lay his tablet, still plugged into the wall charger. Something about the scene felt wrong. "John," Laura said over her communicator, her voice tense. "We need to find Daniel. Now." Back in their quarters, John reviewed the surveillance footage from the ship's cameras. It didn't take long to spot Daniel wandering toward the hydroponics bay late last night. His movements were slow, almost aimless, as if he were lost in thought. Then, abruptly, the feed cut out. John clenched his fists. "They're covering their tracks," he muttered. "Whoever took him doesn't want us finding out how or why." A few hours later, an announcement echoed through the ship. Daniel's body had been found floating in the hydroponics bay. Officially, it was ruled an accident, a tragic slip while inspecting the plants. But John and Laura knew better. Later that evening, they attended the somber memorial service held in Daniel's honor. Alien crew members and human diplomats gathered in silence as Commander Vexstar delivered a brief eulogy. John stood rigidly, his jaw tight, while Laura fought back tears. They both knew Daniel hadn't died by accident. He had been silenced. As the ceremony ended, Laura pulled John aside. "This is bigger than we thought," she whispered. "Whoever is behind this isn't just targeting us. They're cleaning house. If we don't figure out who betrayed Daniel, we'll be next." John nodded grimly. "Then we stop playing defense and start hitting back. Whoever did this wants us scared. Let's make sure they regret crossing us." Neither of them noticed the faint glint of light reflecting off a camera lens nearby. Watching, recording, waiting. The days following Daniel's death were tense and heavy. John Carter and Laura Bennett worked tirelessly, their movements sharp and deliberate as they tried to piece together what had happened. The weight of suspicion hung over every conversation, every interaction. They couldn't trust anyone, not even the other human diplomats aboard the Vanguard *. Laura spent hours poring over the files Daniel had uncovered before his death. She knew it was dangerous, but she also knew they couldn't afford to ignore the clues he'd left behind. Using her translator device, she managed to crack part of the encryption on one of the messages. What she found made her stomach churn. "John," she whispered urgently, pulling him into a corner of their quarters where no cameras could see them. "Look at this." On the screen was a list of names, Zarnith officials who had quietly opposed the Empire's harsh policies. Next to each name was a timestamp marking their sudden disappearance or death. It didn't take long to realize what it meant. Earth Command had been eliminating potential allies within the Empire to avoid being linked to dissent. John's face darkened as he read through the details. "They're using us to do their dirty work," he muttered. "Daniel must have figured it out, and that's why he was killed." Laura nodded grimly. "Whoever is running this operation isn't just targeting the Zarnith. They're willing to sacrifice anyone who gets in their way, even one of our own." Determined to fight back, they decided to accelerate their plans. While Earth Command played its shadowy game, John and Laura would focus on undermining the Empire directly. That night, Laura infiltrated another restricted database, this time targeting propaganda materials used by the Zarnith to suppress rebellion among their colonies. She carefully altered the content, embedding subliminal messages designed to inspire resistance. Phrases like "freedom begins with unity" and "question authority" were woven into speeches and broadcasts meant to enforce loyalty. Meanwhile, John arranged secret trade agreements with several Outer Rim planets. By redirecting resources away from the Empire's core worlds, he hoped to weaken their economic power. The changes were subtle, almost invisible, but over time, they would add up. Colonies already struggling under the Empire's rule would find themselves better equipped to resist. Their efforts began to bear fruit almost immediately. Reports of unrest poured in from across the Empire's borders. Factories slowed production due to shortages. Protests erupted in cities once considered loyal strongholds. Even some mid-level Zarnif officers began questioning orders, unsure if their superiors truly had the people's best interests at heart. But success came at a cost. Commander Vextar grew more aggressive in his investigation, his presence looming over every meeting and negotiation. He started demanding access to classified Earth communications, citing security concerns. John skillfully deflected his requests, claiming diplomatic immunity, but both he and Laura knew it was only a matter of time before Vextar pushed harder. One evening, as they reviewed their progress, Emily Ross, the youngest member of their team, walked into the room unannounced. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her blue eyes were filled with unease. "I need to talk to you," she said softly, closing the door behind her. John and Laura exchanged a glance. "What is it?" John asked cautiously. Emily hesitated, then pulled out her own tablet. On the screen was a copy of the same encrypted message Laura had been studying earlier. "I didn't mean to snoop," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. "But I saw Daniel working on these files before he died. I thought maybe I could help." Laura stepped closer, her expression softening. "You shouldn't have done this, Emily. It's not safe." "I know," Emily replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. If we're doing all this for freedom, for justice, why does it feel so wrong?" John sighed, rubbing his temples. "Because nothing about this mission is clean. We're fighting fire with fire, and sometimes that means getting burned." Emily looked between them, searching for answers. But all she found was the same uncertainty she felt herself. As she left the room, John turned to Laura. "She's going to be trouble," he said quietly. "She's scared," Laura countered. "And she has every right to be. So are we." Outside, the stars shone brightly against the endless void of space. For a moment, John allowed himself to imagine a future where humanity stood tall without resorting to deception and betrayal. Then reality snapped back into focus. Until the Empire fell, there would be no peace and no innocence left to protect. Emily Ross couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing her grip on what was right. She sat alone in her quarters, staring at the tablet in her hands. The encrypted files Daniel had been working on haunted her. Phrases like "necessary sacrifices" and lists of names blurred together until they felt like accusations aimed directly at her. Was this really the kind of work Earth had sent them to do? To manipulate, deceive, and destroy? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She hesitated before opening it, half expecting Commander Vextar or one of his officers. Instead, she found John Carter standing there, his face unreadable. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded, stepping aside to let him in. She didn't trust herself to speak yet. John took a seat at the edge of her desk, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. "You've been asking questions," he began, his tone calm but firm. "About things you shouldn't." Emily swallowed hard. "I just want to understand why we're doing this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are we pretending to help these people when all we're doing is tearing their world apart?" John leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because sometimes the only way to fix something broken is to break it even more," he replied. "The Zarnith Empire has crushed countless lives under its boot. They've enslaved entire species, wiped out cultures, and left planets barren. Do you think they'd ever give up power willingly? No. Sometimes, you have to force change, even if it's ugly. But at what cost? Emily shot back, her voice rising despite herself. How many innocent people have to suffer because of us? How many lies do we tell before we become no better than them? John didn't answer right away. He looked tired, the lines on his face deeper than she remembered. You're not wrong to ask these questions, he admitted finally. But remember this, every choice we make has consequences. If we stop now, everything we've worked for falls apart, and the Empire wins. Is that what you want? Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. No, but I don't know if I can keep going like this. It feels wrong. Before John could respond, an alarm blared through the ship, startling them both. Red lights flashed outside her window, casting eerie shadows across the room. Over the intercom, a voice announced, "Security breach detected. All personnel report to designated stations immediately." John stood up quickly. "Stay here," he ordered. "Don't leave this room until I come back for you." As he hurried out, Emily sank onto her bed, clutching the tablet tightly. She wanted to believe him, to trust that their mission was worth the cost. But doubt gnawed at her, eating away at the resolve she once had. Minutes later, heavy boots echoed down the corridor outside her door. She froze, listening intently as voices spoke in hushed tones. Then came the sound of someone entering a code into the lock. Her heart pounded as the door slid open, revealing Commander Vextar flanked by 2 armed guards. "Ambassador Ross," Vextar said coldly, stepping inside. "You are under arrest for espionage against the Zarnith Empire." "What?" Emily stammered, backing away instinctively. "This is a mistake. I haven't done anything." Vextar's expression remained impassive. "Your recent activities suggest otherwise. You will accompany us for questioning." One of the guards moved toward her, grabbing her arm roughly. Emily struggled briefly, panic setting in. "You don't understand," she cried. "I'm not." Her protests were cut short as they dragged her out of the room. Down the hall, Laura Bennett watched from the shadows, her face pale with fear. She had seen enough to know what happened to those taken by Vextar. And she doubted Emily would survive long enough to reveal anything useful. Later, when John returned to find Emily gone, Laura told him everything. His jaw tightened as he processed the news. "We can't save her," he said after a long silence, "not without blowing our cover." Laura nodded reluctantly, though guilt weighed heavily on her chest. "Do you think she'll talk?" "I don't know," John replied grimly. "But either way, the clock is ticking. We need to move faster, and hope she holds out long enough for us to finish what we started." Outside, the stars seemed colder than ever, their light offering no comfort to those caught in the shadow of betrayal. Emily sat in a dimly lit cell, her hands bound tightly behind her back. The air was cold and stale, carrying the faint metallic scent of the Zarnith ship. She had lost track of time since her arrest, unsure how long she'd been locked away. Vextar's questions replayed in her mind over and over, his sharp voice cutting through her thoughts like a blade. "Who gave you access to classified files?" he had demanded during one interrogation session. "What do you know about Operation Eclipse?" She hadn't answered, not because she wanted to protect John and Laura, but because she barely understood what they were doing herself. Each question felt like another layer of confusion piled onto guilt. Was she being punished for trying to uncover the truth? Or was this simply what happened when you got too close to secrets that weren't meant to be shared? Her silence only seemed to fuel Vextar's anger. After hours of relentless questioning, he finally left her alone, muttering something about giving her time to reconsider her loyalty. But Emily knew better. He wasn't going to let her go. If anything, he was waiting for her to break. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could hold out. Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard *, John Carter and Laura Bennett worked feverishly to salvage their mission. They couldn't risk mounting a rescue for Emily. Doing so would expose them all. Instead, they focused on accelerating their plans to destabilize the Empire. Every minute counted now, especially with Vextar breathing down their necks. Laura hacked into the ship's communication systems, planting forged evidence implicating other alien factions in the growing unrest across the Empire's borders. Messages supposedly sent by rival species appeared on Zarnith monitors, each one carefully crafted to deepen divisions within the Empire. At the same time, John arranged for Earth's military to launch covert strikes against key supply routes, further crippling the Empire's ability to maintain control. Their efforts began to show results almost immediately. Reports flooded in from outer colonies describing widespread protests and acts of defiance. Entire regions were slipping out of the Empire's grasp, falling prey to chaos fueled by years of oppression and humanity's quiet manipulation. But success came at a cost. Suspicion among the Zarnith leadership reached an all-time high. High-ranking officials turned on each other, accusing rivals of treachery or incompetence. Even Commander Vextar found himself under scrutiny as his investigation into human activities failed to produce concrete answers. One evening, John and Laura gathered in their quarters to review their progress. The tension between them was palpable, though neither voiced their fears aloud. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "Do you think Emily talked?" she asked quietly. John shook his head. "I don't know, but if she did, we'll find out soon enough." As if on cue, a notification flashed on one of their screens. Emily Ross was scheduled to stand trial the next morning. The announcement sent shockwaves through the ship. Her case would be broadcast live across the Empire, turning her into a symbol of human betrayal or innocence. Laura clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her. "We can't just sit here while they crucify her," she said sharply. "There has to be something we can do." John stared at the floor for a moment before looking up. "There is," he replied grimly. "But it means sacrificing ourselves." He explained his plan. During the trial, he would step forward and take full responsibility for everything. The altered broadcasts, the trade agreements, even Operation Eclipse. By making himself the scapegoat, he hoped to buy enough time for Laura to finish dismantling the Empire's infrastructure. "But they'll kill you," Laura protested, her voice trembling. "They'll try," John admitted. "But if it buys us freedom, for Earth, for everyone, it's worth it." The weight of his decision settled over them like a storm cloud. Outside, the stars continued to shine, oblivious to the sacrifices being made in their name. As dawn approached, John prepared himself for what lay ahead, knowing that sometimes the hardest choices were also the most necessary. The trial of Emily Ross became a spectacle broadcast across the Zarnith Empire. The courtroom was a vast chamber, its walls lined with glowing panels that displayed the faces of millions watching from afar. Alien dignitaries filled the seats, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. At the center of it all stood Emily, pale and trembling but resolute. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of John or Laura, but they were nowhere to be seen. Commander Vextar presided over the proceedings, his towering form casting a shadow over the entire chamber. He began by presenting evidence against Emily, encrypted messages, altered files, and intercepted communications, linking her to acts of rebellion within the Empire. Each piece of evidence painted her as a traitor, a dangerous infiltrator who had exploited the Empire's trust. "Do you deny these accusations?" Vextar asked, his voice booming through the room. Emily hesitated, her mind racing. She knew the truth, that she had stumbled into something far bigger than herself, but revealing it now would only make things worse. Instead, she shook her head. "I didn't do what you're accusing me of," she said firmly, though her voice wavered. "I'm not part of whatever conspiracy you think exists." Vextar sneered, clearly unconvinced. Before he could press further, the doors at the back of the chamber burst open. John Carter strode in, his presence commanding despite the weight of the moment. Every eye turned to him as he approached the center of the room, stopping just a few feet away from Emily. "This ends now," John declared, his tone calm but unyielding. "Emily Ross is innocent. If anyone deserves punishment, it's me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vextar stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Explain yourself, Ambassador." John took a deep breath, then launched into a carefully prepared confession. He admitted to manipulating trade agreements, altering propaganda materials, and sowing dissent among the Empire's colonies. "Everything we've done was to expose your corruption," he said, his voice rising with conviction. "You rule through fear and oppression, and humanity won't stand by while you destroy lives." For a moment, the room fell silent. Then chaos erupted as alien officials shouted accusations and demands for justice. Vextar raised a hand to silence them, his gaze locked on John. "Your actions will not go unpunished," he growled. "Guards, take him into custody." As two armored soldiers moved to seize John, Laura Bennett appeared at the edge of the crowd, accompanied by several sympathetic alien crew members. In her hands, she held a stolen shuttle remote. "We're leaving," she called out, her voice steady despite the tension. "Now." Without hesitation, Laura activated the device. Alarms blared as emergency exits sealed shut, trapping most of the spectators inside. Chaos broke out as aliens scrambled to escape, giving John, Laura, and Emily their chance. They ran toward a side corridor, dodging guards and narrowly avoiding capture. Behind them, Vextar roared orders, his composure cracking under the pressure. "Stop them," he barked, but his words were drowned out by the noise of the panicked crowd. Reaching the rendezvous point, they found a small shuttle waiting. Laura climbed aboard first, quickly powering up the engines while John helped Emily inside. As they lifted off, explosions rocked the Vanguard *, a diversion orchestrated by Alex Monroe, Daniel's replacement, who had sabotaged key systems to create an opening. Through the viewport, they watched the flagship shrink behind them, its once imposing form now engulfed in flames and confusion. For the first time in days, Emily allowed herself to breathe. "What happens now?" she asked softly. John glanced at her, his expression grim but determined. "Now, we finish what we started, no matter the cost." Ahead of them, the stars stretched endlessly, offering both hope and uncertainty. Humanity's fight against the Empire was far from over, but for the first time, victory felt possible. The stolen shuttle hurtled through space, its engines straining as it fled the chaos they had left behind. Inside, John Carter sat in the pilot's seat, his hands gripping the controls tightly. Laura Bennett worked furiously at a nearby console, encrypting a message that would soon be broadcast across the entire Zarnith Empire. Emily Ross sat silently in the back, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. "We're running out of time," Laura said sharply, glancing at the sensors. "Vextar will send fighters after us any minute." John nodded, his jaw clenched. "Then we'd better make this count." He adjusted their course, aiming for a remote relay station orbiting a dead star. It was risky. Getting close enough to transmit their message could expose them to enemy fire, but it was the only way to ensure their story reached every corner of the Empire. As the shuttle approached the relay station, Laura finalized the video expose. It was a damning compilation of years' worth of evidence. Recordings of Zarnith atrocities, secret orders authorizing genocide, and footage of officials laughing about the suffering of conquered worlds. The piece de resistance was a personal address from John, speaking directly to the oppressed peoples of the Empire. "To those who have suffered under the Zarnith regime," he began, his voice steady and resolute, "know this: you are not alone. Humanity stands with you in your fight for freedom. The corruption and cruelty you've endured must end, and together we can bring it down." Laura pressed the transmit button just as alarms blared throughout the shuttle. Enemy ships had arrived, their weapons locked onto the tiny craft. Laser fire streaked past them, narrowly missing the hull. John maneuvered desperately, dodging blasts while keeping the shuttle aligned with the relay. "They're jamming our signal," Laura shouted, frantically working to maintain the connection. "We need 10 more seconds." 10 seconds might as well be 10 years, John muttered, sweat dripping down his face. Another blast rocked the shuttle, sending sparks flying from a damaged panel. Smoke filled the cabin, making it hard to see. Emily leaned forward, her fear giving way to determination. "Let me help," she said firmly, taking over one of the auxiliary consoles. Though inexperienced, she followed Laura's instructions, rerouting power to keep the transmission alive. For a moment, it seemed like they wouldn't make it, but then the console lit up green. "It's done," Laura announced, relief washing over her face. "The message is out." No sooner had she spoken than a massive explosion rocked the shuttle. One of the pursuing ships had fired a concentrated beam, disabling their engines. The shuttle drifted helplessly in space, surrounded by hostile vessels. On board the lead ship, Commander Vextar watched the crippled shuttle through his viewport. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried quiet fury when he spoke. "Prepare boarding parties. Bring them to me alive." Back on the shuttle, John turned to Laura and Emily. "This isn't over," he said firmly. "Even if they capture us, the truth is already spreading. The Empire will fall. It's only a matter of time." As the shuttle's airlock hissed open and armed soldiers stormed aboard, Laura exchanged a glance with John. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. Whatever happened next, they had struck a blow that could never be undone. Across the galaxy, the impact of their message was immediate. Colonized planets erupted in rebellion, inspired by John's words and horrified by the revelations. Factories shut down, supply lines collapsed, and even some mid-level Zarnith officers defected, unwilling to defend a regime built on lies and bloodshed. Earth's military seized the opportunity, launching coordinated strikes against key installations to cripple the Empire's ability to retaliate. For the first time in centuries, hope ignited among the oppressed, a flame fanned by humanity's audacity and sacrifice. But for John, Laura, and Emily, trapped aboard an enemy vessel, the cost of victory weighed heavily. They had gambled everything, knowing full well they might not survive to see the dawn of a new era. Yet, as the stars shimmered outside their prison cell, they took solace in one undeniable truth. The tide had turned, and there was no going back. Months passed, and the Zarnith Empire lay in ruins. What had once been a vast and unshakable dominion was now fractured into dozens of independent states, each struggling to find its footing in the aftermath of collapse. The rebellion sparked by John Carter's message had spread like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. Planets that had suffered under the Empire's rule for generations were finally free. But freedom came at a cost. John, Laura, and Emily were never seen again after their capture. Rumors swirled about their fate. Some said they had been executed aboard Vextar's ship, while others claimed they were imprisoned on a remote penal colony. Whatever the truth, their actions became legend. Across the galaxy, people whispered their names with reverence, calling them heroes who had dared to challenge an unbeatable foe. Back on Earth, humanity emerged as a dominant force in the universe. The success of their covert mission proved that strength wasn't always measured in weapons or armies. It could also be found in ideas, courage, and sacrifice. But not everyone celebrated. Many questioned whether the ends justified the means, pointing to the countless lives lost in the chaos of revolution. John's final words echoed in Laura's mind whenever she thought of him. *, we didn't just dismantle an empire. We became what we fought against. *, those words haunted her as she dedicated herself to rebuilding shattered worlds. She traveled from planet to planet, helping former colonies establish governments, rebuild infrastructure, and heal wounds both physical and emotional. It was punishing work, but it gave her purpose, a way to honor those who had paid the ultimate price. Emily, too, carried scars from their ordeal. Though she survived the collapse of the Empire, the guilt of her role in its downfall weighed heavily on her. She spent years writing accounts of their mission, determined to ensure the truth was never forgotten. Her memoirs became required reading across human space, a reminder of the complexities of war and the moral compromises it demanded. As for John, his name became synonymous with defiance. Statues were erected in his honor, and stories of his bravery inspired future generations. Yet those who knew him best remembered him not as a symbol but as a man, flawed, weary, and driven by a desire to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. One quiet evening, long after the dust had settled, Laura stood on a balcony overlooking a newly liberated city. Lights twinkled in the distance, evidence of life slowly returning to normal. She sipped a cup of tea, reflecting on all they had achieved and lost. "Do you think it was worth it?" a voice asked behind her. It was Alex Monroe, Daniel's replacement, now working alongside her to rebuild the region. Laura turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "It's not a question of worth," she replied softly. "We did what we had to do. Whether it was right or wrong, history will decide." Alex nodded silently, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Above them, the stars shone brightly, indifferent to the struggles of those below. Humanity's place among them was no longer one of weakness or fear. It was one of power and responsibility. And though the road ahead would be difficult, Laura knew one thing for certain. The universe would never forget the day it realized human diplomats were its most dangerous war criminals. Far away in the depths of space, the remnants of the Zarnith Empire faded into memory. A new chapter had begun, one written in blood, hope, and the enduring spirit of those brave enough to fight for change.